28 years later, plot speculation. Now that 28 years later is officially announced, I'm absolutely hyped. 28 Days Later is my favorite zombie movie ever made. I wanted to give my fan theory about the plot of the upcoming trilogy. During 28 weeks later, we learned that the rage virus can be carried instead of fully turning its victims. At the end, we see that it spread to Paris, which unfortunately means the rest of the world. 28 months later, humanity is on the verge of complete and total extinction. Nuclear weapons are used to destroy the infected, however, it was in vain. Most of humanity is wiped out. 28 years later, the war still rages on. The remaining parts humanity have united to end the infected once and for all and bring about some form of normalcy. Those who are carriers are either shunned from society or executed. There are factions of carriers that want to kill those who have abandoned them. In a strange turn of events, some of the infected have changed. They have begun to go into remission. Some infected are no longer mindless and their rage can be contained. The carriers save those who have returned because they know too well what it is like to be shunned by humanity. They carry the hope of humanity and those who are sick. One of these infected who have lost their rage will go on an odyssey to save those who are like themselves and end the war once and for all. Now let's dive into comment section. This proposal risks undermining the essence of the trilogy. Introducing smart, self-aware zombies could significantly detract from the authentic atmosphere established in the initial two movies. Similar narrative choices have previously led to complications, as seen in the Jurassic World franchise, where intelligent dinosaurs and hybrids resulted in a convoluted storyline. It's preferable to maintain the intense and chaotic nature of rage-filled zombies for a more cohesive and engaging narrative. Next comment. There would still be rage zombies. I don't think I explained it very well. What I was trying to say is that a group of infected have gone into remission. So essentially they are no longer zombies, but the world still doesn't care because they still have the virus in them. Those who are no longer mindless remember every single moment of their rage. They remember every person that they have killed and every ounce of pain they have inflicted. Next comment. These aren't zombies. They are infected. Zombies are reanimated dead. Who's to say that the virus didn't weaken as it passed from person to person over 28 years? The nature of some viral strains mean that they weaken as they spread, even if just a tiny bit. Next comment. 28 Days Later is actually inspired by the book Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. The scene where the main character leaves hospital and wanks around a deserted London is taken directly from the page. Next comment. I'm just imagining Cillian walking around derelict downtown London with his tallywhacker out smashing his potatoes. Next comment. Yeah, that's the idea. 28 weeks introduced us to carriers. I assume after 28 years the virus would evolve in some capacity. But thing is, these infected who can control it remember every single second of their rage, every ounce of pain, and every single person that they killed/infected. Next comment. Like I said, 28 Days is my favorite. It's the GOAT. With COVID recently, it's the perfect time to get a really good zombie movie. Also, the original creators are back, so I know it's going to be great. I truly think these films could be Oscar-worthy. Next comment. The problem with this is that the virus needs to have been contained for there to still be any zombies left in 28 years. These are not undead zombies, they just die of starvation after a little while. They have no self-preservation, they literally can't last that long. The plot has to be pretty much almost the same as 28 Days Later. Virus was contained and it exists in a lab, only it escapes, rinse and repeat. Next comment. The big difference in the 28 universe is that they're not really zombies, i.e. walking/running corpses. They're living humans who need the things living humans need, like food and water. Eccleston's whole strategy in the first movie was to hunker down and wait for the infected to starve to death. And while he definitely went about things the wrong way, he was proven right at the end of that movie. I don't think there would still be hordes of infected 28 years later, or at least not ones left over from the European outbreak. The speed of the virus also means that it would be harder to spread via intercontinental air travel. If someone's infected, there's no way they're going to be able to get on a plane and land somewhere else before they've turned. Carriers are another story. Interestingly, while carriers are immune to the effects of the virus, the regular infected do not differentiate between carriers and non-carriers. A carrier who started an outbreak would be pretty quickly attacked by anyone they infected, which we see in 28 weeks later. Next comment. The rage virus goes cross-species, and instead of humans running around killing each other, it's a bunch of kangaroos with the rage virus. Just totally fucking people up all over the planet. Also, maybe a few raged-out seagulls and anteaters as well. Cillian is of course in it because, let's be honest, the guy's a better actor than Brad Pitt. Some crazy stuff happened between 28 weeks and 28 years, and there are overpopulations of kangaroos in every city on Earth. Once the virus crosses species, all hell breaks loose. Cillian is forced to develop a kangaroo killing machine, i.e. lawn mowers with the blade on the top controlled with AI guidance systems. Once released, they make quick work of raged kangaroos. Cillian eventually makes his way back to Britain where, for some reason, there are no kangaroos. He builds a home and lives happily ever after. Next comment. No way will we be seeing apocalypse in 28 years later. The rage virus spread to mainland Europe, but Ireland, Iceland, Malta, Cyprus, Greek islands, Sardinia, Sicily, and other well-populated islands in Europe wouldn't have been affected. That's millions of Europeans safe. Also, millions more will have fled to the islands. It's also possible Europe created a defensive line and protected a chunk of the mainland and then waited for the virus to again die out. Worst case scenario, mainland Europe, Russia, mainland Asia, the Middle East, and maybe Africa. Africa could just militarize the Suez Canal. Were infected. So North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Ireland, Iceland, Sardinia, Cyprus, Malta, etc. will be spared. No apocalypse, just billions dead. The world recovers. My bet is the film will deal with a military team and scientists being tasked to enter Britain or mainland Europe to find a cure. We may end up in a situation where the virus has mutated and some infected have survived in Britain and mainland Europe and Asia for 28 years. There will be an attempt to gain a sample that can create a vaccine. Maybe this happens as for the first time birds or something are identified as being infected with rage and have brought the virus to Ireland or Canada or something, causing a minor outbreak amongst humans that was stopped quick, or a massive outbreak amongst livestock maybe. So now the world is faced with the fact it must go into the now totally abandoned and banned from entry mainland Europe and mainland Asia to prevent the world from ending. There's rumors of a new trilogy. So my guess is 28 years later equals the world scrambles for a cure, tries to save billions, fails, and a new mutated version of the virus breaks out and spreads everywhere. Next 28 decades later, civilization is on the brink. Remaining pockets of civilization exist in small towns and cities under military control. Generations have passed, all living in fear. Still no cure and time running out. 28 centuries later, mankind has fully regressed to a medieval society. One where the humans battle for survival constantly against rage-infected humans and animals in a world where science is long forgotten but a fluke in nature sees the virus become no longer a threat as people begin to develop natural immunity, and finally mankind can rebuild without fear. A new renaissance can begin. Next comment. The one carrier out of a population of 70 million reaching mainland Europe, France, makes it very, very rare. Carriers are clearly super rare, and for any to both get infected and live long enough to flee overseas is highly rare too. Ireland and Australia, etc. are almost certainly well situated to avoid infection. The only way the virus is spreading out of Britain, mainland Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and maybe Africa is someone carrying the virus travels to the Americas, Ireland, Sicily, Iceland, Australia, Japan, etc. I just can't see many carriers getting out. Also, after what happened in France and mainland Europe, you can bet the Irish/Icelandic/Japanese/Australian, Indonesian, Taiwanese, Filipino/US/Canadian, Brazilian, Cillian navies and coast guards will be mass patrolling and have shoot-to-kill orders on site for any refugees trying to cross to their nations by sea. No risks justified. Countries may have taken in evacuees from places like Spain, Italy, Poland, Russia, China, India, etc. for the first few weeks in advance of the virus fully spreading from France to the rest of Eurasia via infected on foot. But due to the risk of carriers, I'm sure once a country had an active infection this time around, no one was allowed out and the militaries of the remaining nations killed anyone who tried leave by boat, with planes also denied landing. No one will risk carriers entering other landmasses now that they know they exist. The ocean is the only barrier to infection, and so any people using it will be shot. Next comment. 1 out of 70 million. That's all that made it out as carriers. About 15 million were evacuated and one was a carrier. So in 6 months, one person that was a carrier made it out. As for Ireland being infected, yeah, it's closer to Britain than any other nation, other than France via Calais, but if Ireland dodged infection when there was 50 million infected on the island of Britain running crazed, then it is unlikely to be infected in the second wave, as recolonization seen only a few thousand return over a few weeks, and all were housed in the far south in London, on the Isle of Dogs. The rest of the survivors were evacuated. The chances of one person amongst the few thousand on the Isle of Dogs being immune, getting infected and then walking from London all the way to Wales or Scotland to cross over the Irish Sea to Ireland, when Ireland will have deployed its entire armed forces and navy and police, as well as the remaining British Navy and armed forces fully based in Northern Ireland, the only UK nation left, to patrol Ireland's coast following the second outbreak is so minuscule and low. France was always in more danger due to the tiny channel between England and France. That's why the helicopter went to France from London, as it was far closer than Ireland. And again, he was the only known immune out of the entire remaining British population. If any of the 15 million evacuees were infected and immune, they'd have already spread it in their host nation as a refugee by sharing a glass, kissing someone, spitting or coughing droplets on someone by 6 months in. Next comment. Next comment. Fun idea, but I doubt it's going to be like this. It's probably going to be some way like this. In 28 years later, a small portion of humanity tries to rebuild civilization in a safe spot. Soon they're overtaken by the infected, brought in by someone who was kicked out of the community, and that's their revenge to the community. Next comment. 28 weeks is completely ignored in 28 years, as Boyle had little to no input, only the opening scene. The new movie, I feel, will be very different in its own way, but still great. Next comment. I'm wondering how the titles of the next 2 movies will look, because I've heard they want to make a new trilogy from this film, and 28 decades and 28 centuries seems a little ridiculous, LMAO. Next comment. Just a thought, but they don't necessarily have to keep increasing the period of time passed. They could go down and do 28 months later, and then another 28 weeks later, since they're ignoring the original 28 weeks later. 28 nights later? 28 moons later? LOL. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, curious listener, for more. Choose here your next story.